This episode is supported in part by Sacred Wright's public scholarship on religion, gender, and sexuality through a grant from the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation. You can find Sacred Wrights online at sacred-rights.org and the Carpenter Foundation at carpenterfoundation.us. You are listening to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Swasti Bhattacharyya. Swasti Bhattacharyya is Professor Emerita of Philosophy and Religion. She has been researching, writing, and teaching in religious studies and applied ethics for over 2 decades. Her work is rooted in her upbringing as a daughter of an immigrant Hindu father from India and a Japanese Buddhist mother born and raised in Hawaii. She utilized her experiences as a registered nurse and as an applied ethicist in several publications presenting Hindu perspectives on bioethical issues and on cultural humility. We discuss her current creative nonfiction project, which combines her academic expertise with her long-term relationships with the women of the Brahma, Vidya, Mandir Ashram, an intentional, spiritually focused women's community in rural central India. I really hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Dr. Swasti Bhattacharyya, welcome to Classical Ideas.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am also delighted that you're here. I'm wondering if we can kick this off by having you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners out there so they know just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm an applied ethicist who's Professor Emerita of Philosophy and Religion. I have been researching, writing, and teaching in religious studies and applied ethics for about 2 decades. And I explain what applied ethics is because people always look at me and go, "What's that?"
Sure.
Well, ethics is about how we make decisions, not just the decision itself. It's about the process. And often in the classroom, what I'm doing is kind of helping the students peel back the onions, of the layers of how they make decisions. Because most people, when they're making decisions, it's grounded in the worldview into which they were born. And those worldviews are often influenced by different philosophical and religious perspectives. And I like to kind of help the students explore that.
Wonderful. I want to know how you got to that point. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the major turning points throughout your life that led you on this intellectual and academic path? How did you come to do this for a living?
So I've always been interested in religion, and different people's belief systems. And I am convinced that we do, especially in the academy, we explore issues that are at the core of who we are and so I was born into a very multi-religious, multi-cultural family. My father was born and raised in India and was a Hindu. My mom was born and raised in Hawaii, was raised a Buddhist. And then during the war, they shut down the temples here in Hawaii. And did I say she was Japanese? She's Japanese from Hawaii. And, she was raised Buddhist. And they shut down the temple, so my grandfather sent her and her younger sister to the church up the street. So then she converts to Protestant Christianity. She meets my dad. They get married. She then becomes a Seventh-day Adventist Christian because of him. He stays a Hindu. We're in church on time because of him, and he dies a Hindu. And you can't erase thousands of years of Buddhism in my mom's family with one conversion, right? And so she had a very open mind. And so I grew up with all these different ideas. And when I was in a Seventh-day Adventist setting, I was always wrong. And I always had these questions. And I remember as a 5th grader walking home thinking, if what I learned in school today is true, Daddy's going to hell. And I'm like, I have a problem with that. So then I get home. And they must have talked about reincarnation because I asked my father, and I have a very clear memory of this. I said, "Daddy, do you believe in reincarnation?" And then he proceeds to explain it to me in a way that made total sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." And then I just went on my way. And so I've always been interested in exploring that. So I went to seminary. Actually, the reason I went to seminary was because I needed to get Greek. You asked for a turning point. I went to Jerusalem the day after my high school graduation. And it's a long story, but the thing that I realized there, I was 18 and I had all the answers. And I get to Jerusalem. It was in 82 when the war broke out with Lebanon, and those 241 Marines were killed in Lebanon. And I went to a memorial service. And I'm sitting there, and this guard starts crying. He's standing there, but you can see the tears. And I thought, wow. And that's when I realized I thought I had all the answers, but they weren't to the questions people were asking. And so then that taught me to kind of sit back and learn more. So that was a turning point. That's when I realized I didn't know everything. Then I went to seminary because I needed to get Greek. I had Hebrew. I wanted to get Greek. I wanted to get a PhD in ancient Judaism and Christianity, in Second Temple history, actually. Then I took nursing. So in undergrad, I was a double major. I was religion and nursing. And I took the nursing because I knew I could have a PhD in religion, but if bombs started dropping around me, what could I do to help? I thought with nursing, I would have a practical skill.
Yeah.
And I could have a PhD in religion and not have a job. So then I would have a job. And I will say, I've told my students, following your heart's desire is really important because life is short. I've never had a job that I had to have, which gives you a freedom that's really nice. So then, that's why I took nursing. I worked as a nurse, and that helped me get through the rest of my grad school. I was in grad school forever, ended up at USC, doing religion and social ethics. And there is when I started doing bioethics because I wanted to bring Hindu perspectives into the hospital room where I was because I could see where that would be useful.
Do you have any cool mentors from grad school or any academic influences, people, adults in your life that were kind of pushing you along into any particular ways and helping you out?
My mentor was Dr. Christopher Chappell, Chris Chappell. He's at Loyola Marymount University. He had come to USC while I was there, and I was the lead TA for the Religions of Asia class. And we hit it off right away. He helped me. Actually, he was helping me figure out what I was going to do for my dissertation. And in the end, he ended up being on the committee, because he was actually not just on the committee, he was a co-chair, even though he was at a different institution. I mean, obviously, I met the requirements for what USC required for the dissertation committee. But since I was doing Hindu bioethics, Bill May, who was the bioethicist at USC, didn't know much about Hinduism, and Chris didn't know much about bioethics. It was kind of funny because I was using the Mahabharata and the stories from that to build this ethic. And Bill May is like, why are you using that text? It's not, a sacred. And I was like, well, it's not the Vedas, but it's incredibly formative. I mean, everybody in India knows the Mahabharata. And then with Chris is like, why are you using that case? Because we were using a case in California at the time. And it's like, because I'm applying these ideas to this. So it was kind of fun. And it really showed me that I really was crossing boundaries with that. So doing that was a turning point for me because I saw how what I was doing was really important. That in the United States, the bioethical discussions are grounded in perspectives that are grounded in Judaism and Christianity primarily. And that's fine. That's a wonderful thing. And this country is an incredibly diverse country. And we have Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains that have been living here for generations. So why not draw from the wisdom of those traditions as we talk about these ethical issues? And in the hospital, it's really important that you understand where your patients are coming from, and so you can work with them.
Well, I know that you've been retired from your professor position for a couple of years, and you've been very busy. since then, working on some other projects, and that's kind of what I want to chat about now. You sent me some writing that you did called Simple Living and High Thinking: Narratives of Hope for a Radically Inclusive World. Tell me a little bit about the origin of this project, just in general, but to kick us off before we get more specific.
So this is in Hinduism, or in Sanskrit, the word is dharma. What it's more than a vocation, more than what you're supposed to do. It's your role. It's all that. Writing this book is really, I feel, my dharma. It's part of my legacy. My father worked with Gandhi when he was young, and he lived in Sevagram, which is an ashram that is 5 miles away from the sisters of the Brahma Vidya Mandir ashram, who are the focus of this book. And he knew them. He was there in 59 when they started. This is an ashram of women. So an ashram is a intentional spiritual community, and it's the first Gandhian intentional spiritual community run by women and for women. And he was connected to them. He knew them. They knew me when before I was even born. They knew I was coming, right? Because my cousin is a member of the ashram. And then we lived in Sevagram when I was young. And so I have memories of them. The older sisters knew me when I was little. And then in 2004, I went to India with my parents, and I gave a paper in Ahmedabad, and then we went back to the ashram to visit. And at this time, here I am, an adult. I'm an applied ethicist. I'm in this ashram for 2 weeks watching these women. And I thought, oh my God, they're not feminist, environmentalist, or peace activists, but their lives embody the characteristics that are associated with these labels. And the other thing is, they are followers of Vinoba Bhave, who was a disciple, confidant, and spiritual successor to Gandhi. And everybody knows Gandhi. Very, very few people, even in India, know Vinoba Bhave. And he's an amazing character. And I actually met him when I was 6. I have a very strong memory of him, a very nice memory of him.
Can you just summarize who he is, just in general, for listeners who may not have ever heard that name before?
Yes, so Vinoba Bhave is about 20 years younger than Gandhi. And when he was finishing his first year in college, he's from India, obviously. He was finishing his first year. He's on the train to go back and take his final exams. And he's like, you know what? This is not edifying. So he gets off the train and he switches trains and goes to Banaras or Varanasi, Kashi. It's on the Ganga River. That's a very important city for India. And there he's trying to decide if he wants to become a revolutionary and join, the movement to free India from the British, or to become a sannyasi and follow this spiritual path and be a world renouncer. He hears Gandhi give the inaugural address for the Banaras Hindu University. And he doesn't hear it. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. He reads Gandhi's inaugural address to Banaras Hindu University in the newspaper. And he's really impressed how Gandhi is calling out the people in power, speaking to the uneducated, speaking to the population, and calling everybody to come, and live out this principle of ahimsa, of nonviolence. So long story short, I could talk about him forever. He joins Gandhi, and when he goes to the ashram, because Gandhi invites him to Sabarmati ashram, Gandhi says, people come here to learn. We will learn from him. And he was a man of great integrity. He leaves college after his first year of college, but he was a self-taught person. He learned, I forget how many languages. I mean, he learned Arabic so that he could read the Quran. He knew Japanese, he knew German, he knew all these different Indian languages. Incredibly bright person. He loved mathematics, and he was the spiritual center, actually, of the movement. People think of Gandhi as the spiritual person, and I'm not saying he's not, but he was a politician.
Yeah.
And, whereas Vinoba was not, and Vinoba actually explicitly rejected politics and says politics is about power and I'm about the people. And he started Gandhi took that term sarvodaya, which means the uplifting of all. It's a holistic uplifting of all humanity and the earth. And he took that out of the lexicon. People will credit Gandhi to coining it. He actually didn't coin it, but he uplifted it, right? And out of the lexicon. Vinoba took it and he made it into a movement after Gandhi's death, or after Gandhi was assassinated. And the biggest thing that he's known for is called the Buddhan Yagna, where he walked in 1951, and there's a whole story there, but he walked for 13 years asking people who had land to give it to those who had none. And it was his way of thinking, this is the way we can deal with the issue of poverty in India and the great disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And somebody once was telling him, you should pass legislation to do this. And he said, no, his main goal was to change the hearts and minds of people so that they would see the person across the street, on the street, as their family member and to take care of them. And, he wants us to look at, and that's Sarvodaya is about being all inclusive. And then that's why it's a radical inclusivity. We talk about, equality and freedom. It's like, for whom?
Yeah.
And Sarvodaya would argue everybody. So we have to look to the margins to make sure we're including them. So that's
Gotcha. So let's do a little bit of info about this this ashram. Okay, so it's called Brahma Vidya Mandir. Where is it in India?
So the Brahma Vidya Mandir is in central India, in Maharashtra. Maharashtra, the big city there is Nagpur, and that is the geographical center of India. And the ashram is about an hour drive away from that. So it's in central India. It's very rural, very, very, it's like a 12-hour train ride from Mumbai, and it's very rural. I mean, it's
Okay.
gotten built up more now, but in the last, 30 years and, whatever, but it's it's rural. It's across the river from a village. It's on a hill on the northern banks of the Dam River. So that's where it is.
Tell me about the founders.
So Vinoba was on the Budan, and these women were part of the Sarvodaya movement, and they were walking with him on the Budan. And Rajama is one of the women that was talking to him, and she says, men get to follow a spiritual path. Women we want to follow a spiritual path. And Vinoba was really excited because he and Gandhi actually believed India would progress so far as it would allow its women to learn and become sannyasis and lead, right? And he really felt, he talks about how society pushes women down and that's wrong. And, society is this way because men are, striving for this power and we need the influence of women. So he supported them. He gave them his ashram that is in where the place I just described. And there were 10 women that joined together to found the ashram in March of 1959.
Excellent. So you they were aware of you, but like, how did you come to be involved with the ashram? Sort of as like a documenter, a researcher. Tell me about this coming to this as an adult, as a professor, researcher, etc.
So when I went there with my parents in 2004, I gave a paper in Ahmedabad, and then afterwards we did a 2-week stay there in the ashram. And that was my first return as an adult. And I might have said this already, but I'll say it again. But I'm there as an adult and I'm seeing, I'm an applied ethicist and I see these women and what they're doing. And I thought, wow, I want to learn about them. But the other thing was, I was more and more impressed by Vinoba and his writings, and they were all followers of him, right?
Yeah.
They see him as a saint. And so I thought, I want to write about Vinoba. And so I asked my dad, I said, do you think the sisters would let me come and live with them and learn from them and write a book about Vinoba? And he's like, why not? So I wrote to them and said, can I come interview you and learn from you and then write this book? And I get a letter and they say they unanimously invite you to come. And I was like, oh, that's great. It was unanimous. Well, I only learned later that if it wasn't, then I wouldn't have been there because consensus decision-making processes, and they don't move forward until they have a unanimous decision as to what they can do. So in 2006, between 2006 and 2011, I went every year, and I spent 6 weeks. I spent 6 weeks to 8 months with them because I took 2 leave of absences. One was without pay, one was a sabbatical. I had this award that I got, a teaching award that added a sabbatical, so I'd use that sabbatical to go there. So every chance I had between 2006 and 2011, I was there. And I lived with them. The first year I went, it was funny. In 2006, I had all these plans. I was going to have my, IRB done and have the questionnaire and everything and all my questions. Well, that didn't happen. So I went there with nothing. And that was the best thing that could have happened because I went there and I did whatever they wanted me to do. And they had me in these different classes. So I was going from one sister to another, half an hour sessions every day for 6 weeks. I mean, I now realize how lucky I was. I didn't then. I was like, sometimes I was getting like, another meeting. Okay. And I was right. But I learned so much. And I now realize they have invested so much time in me. And it's in part because they're doing this experiment. They see their ashram as a laboratory in women's spirituality. And what can we do to work together as a collective, as a community, to work towards enlightenment? And that's why they don't leave the community very much. And so I'm this bridge that can take that message, that can take their research out of that into the world. And so with them, I'm kind of straddling that or navigating those boundaries of insider daughter, sister, outsider, applied ethicist, researcher, ethnographer. And it's been a really good experience.
Tell me a little bit about what your just day-to-day life was like inside the ashram. I know you just kind of did a little bit, but like, what are some other little details that stand out to you about your day-to-day life, like the living conditions, the food, anything like that stands out to you?
So the sisters live very simply, and that's where that simple living, high thinking comes from, because Ushadi's definition of spirituality is simple living and high thinking. And I mean, I really like that because it's about talking about being really mindful about how we're living and aligning our philosophical ideas, our thinking with our living. But so their living is very simple. Very simple. Like when I first got there in 2006, there was no refrigeration. There was electricity would go out whenever the electricity went out, so you would have no refrigeration, no fans, and it's 120 degrees, literally 120 degrees. And so I'd throw water on the concrete floor and lay down on the floor because it'd be so hot. But their schedule is it's very interesting. I talk about the ashram space being the physical space itself being special. And I believe it is, and there's multiple reasons for that. But the time seems to move differently there. And it's in part because of how they've orchestrated it. So the bell rings at 4:00 in the morning. They have community prayer at 4:30. They then usually have like a sitting together to read a text or to study a text. And that's just the sisters usually. And that's from like 5:30 to 6. And then at 6, we're cutting vegetables and preparing the meal. The breakfast is at 7. It's a very simple dahlia. I don't know what it's like, a cracked wheat of some kind. It's some grain that's cooked and it's like a cereal thing, and they eat that, and that's every morning basically. Then you're getting ready. Then at 10:30, they have the second prayer gathering where they come together and pray as a community. Then lunch is at like 11 something. And then 12 to 2 is quiet time. And at lunch, you're eating the vegetables and fruits that they've grown. They grow about 80% of 70 to 80% of their own food. They grow all their own wheat and dal and fruits and vegetables. So again, that's simple living. Then from 12 to 2, it's quiet time. And then from 2 to 5, they're doing their work to run the ashram, different jobs and stuff. Then around 5:30 is dinner. Then usually around 6:30 to 7:30, they'll have their meetings, and that's when they decide how they're going to decisions for running the ashram, things that they have to do. 7:45 is the evening prayer, and then they're in bed by 8:30 and lights are out.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to have your lights out. You can do what you want in your own room, but it's quiet time.
Yeah.
And most of them don't talk after that evening prayer that starts. And when you say, what is it like living there? I used to say, it's time slows down. And somebody I was talking on the plane coming back, they go, oh, it's so primitive. We're washing our clothes in a bucket. They don't have washing machines. Well, they didn't. Some of them do now, but it's very, and they said, well, that's just so primitive. And I was like, well, you can call it primitive. I said, but when I'm there, that's the only time I have time to breathe.
Yeah.
I might have a washing machine and all the modern conveniences of technology. And how do we run in our lives? When do we have 5 minutes to stop and just breathe?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So what is their relationship to the community around the ashram? What is that relationship like with the outside world?
So they have one in that the outside world comes to them.
Mm.
So what I haven't said, and I forgot to say this, their goal is samvik sadhana, which means sitting together to work towards enlightenment as a community of women, as a community. So where most people who are on spiritual paths are on the spiritual paths for themselves, they're doing it as a community. And what one of the sisters likened it to is, those sannyasis or those holy men or saints or people that go off into the mountains and they sit in the cave and meditate and then they go, aha, I'm enlightened. Well, that's all fine and good. But when you're by yourself, it's easy to be enlightened. It's when you're interacting with people and you hurt somebody and you see the pain that you've caused, you realize, oh, what did I do? It's a mirror for you, right? For them to pay attention. So if their goal is to gain samvik sadhana as a community of women, they can't be going out and doing all this stuff. So they are not what one would call in the traditional sense of service. They're not service oriented. And one of my friends was critiquing them and said, well, they don't go out and feed the poor. No, you're right. They don't. That's not their job. But if their focus is to gain enlightenment as a community, they're doing that for the benefit of society. And like when people say, oh, you don't do anything, they just sit here. One of the sisters gets a little frustrated and she says, we publish books, we get this out there. Why doesn't that count? Now she doesn't care on the one hand in that sense. She's not worried about what they think. But she says, we sit here on this mountain, on this hill, and we pray. In this age of science, when somebody can push a button and totally annihilate an entire city halfway around the world, why can we not pray from this space for the peace of the world? But to do that deep work requires that they're not running all over the place.
Yeah.
So their interactions with the community are because the community comes to them. So when there are different, like there was a celebration they have for Krishna's birthday, and I was there several times for that. And the community comes, and the sisters will have been working with different individuals that want to chant or sing or give a different, quote a certain passage. The sisters will work with ones that want to do that so that they're, reciting this text or poem or something and then knowing what it means. So that's their interaction. The school kids will come by the busloads. It's a site for field trips. Vinobaji translated the Bhagavad Gita into Marathi. And apparently, I don't know Marathi, but apparently it is one of the most beautiful renditions of the text, both in language and in how he takes those really deep, complex ideas and poetically translates them into understandable ways of understanding them. So a lot of school kids in the area read it and then they come. So they interact that way, but they're not doing what people often like Mother Teresa, they are not.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so I read some portions of this creative nonfiction project that you've been working on with regards to Brahma Vidya Mandir Ashram. What is the future of this project? What are you doing with it?
Well, I'm gonna write a book. I'm writing this book, which I have learned writing stories about the sisters and writing a book are two different projects.
Yeah.
Obviously, the stories will become the book, and so right now, I'm focusing on crafting a book proposal, which will um which will represent the book I'm wanting to write. And I'm wanting to write a book that will share the inspiration that the sisters have given me. And I'm wanting to write a book um for the public, for, outside. Actually, I've always been doing that when I think about it. Like my dissertation was looking at Hindu bioethics, but it wasn't intended for the academy. It was intended to be utilized. And that's why I say I'm an applied ethicist, right? So I've always been trying to bridge these different worlds and translate between them to benefit so that we can benefit from that. Which again, going back to one of your earlier questions, that's what I was doing when I was a little kid, trying to understand these different worlds. And so now as an adult, I'm trying to facilitate understanding between these different worlds so that we can gain from that. So I want to write a book that people will read, and when they read it, that they will reflect more upon who they are, who they want to be, and how they want to live in this world. The sisters, it's not a prescription. You should do X, Y, and Z. Other than that simple living and high thinking. What do you mean by simple living? And what are your high thoughts? What are your philosophies? What are your principles and your values that you want to embed and be the ground for how you live? And that's what I hope this book does. That's my dream.
Excellent.
In the English speaking world, because very few people know about Vinoba. So I could get this book published in India. The sisters have a publishing thing, you know, but I want to introduce this in the English speaking world.
That's awesome. I am very excited for you for the opportunity and the ability to do that. So you have done some recent public scholarship trainings with sacred rites. Tell me about that experience and how that kind of fits into this whole goal.
I met Brooke the summer before when she was directing the April program, and that's the Association for Public Religion and Intellectual Life. And they had a summer colloquium of nonfiction religion. And so I applied for that, and she was directing it, and I saw how good she is at helping us figure out how to translate from the academy into nonfiction and into the public sphere. And so when I realized what she was, because they had talked about sacred rights, but it didn't really click until later. I was like, oh, I need that information. I need to figure out more about how to translate this, what I'm doing, into a public sphere. And so I joined that. I applied for it, got accepted, and the most beneficial part of it was, yes, the lessons that they had in there and the different things that they taught us, but it's the cohort to see that there are many others that are interested in this. Because for me, knowledge is always about learning to share, learning to use it for how can we make our lives better and how can we make it so that we can live in more responsible ways on this earth. And to see that others in the academy are really interested in that was great. And like you've said, the projects are just so vast and really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and this topic, in creative nonfiction, it breaks you out of like the academic journal pipeline, you know what I mean? And it opens you up to more people who might be social studies teachers or just people who are interested in like India or just spirituality in general. Like it opens you up to a wider possibility of readers whenever you, shoot a little bit more broadly than just an academic journal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, what are some like some timelines? What are some goals that you got for public scholarship in the next couple of years?
One thing, and this was inspired by his name is Justin. I forget his last name. It starts with a V, but he's a YouTuber. And he was like, you need to do YouTubes and share the sister stories. So that's one thing I want to start doing as I'm writing, because I've spent the last 2 years writing these stories about the sisters, and they're just really incredible women. I mean, they're normal human beings. I mean, that's one thing. People think of them as saints or they're nuns or this or that, and they're like, no, we're just normal human beings that have made these decisions. And because when you see somebody as a saint, then you're like, put them on a pedestal and like, oh, I don't do that. I can't do that. And they're like, no, we can all do this. We can all live like this. We can all live simply and, grounded in high thinking. So I want to get that out. And then I'm writing this book, my timeline. If I can have a proposal and a first draft of the manuscript done by the end of January 2026, I would be thrilled. I don't know how realistic that is, but it might be possible because I have over 60,000 words of stories written, but now I have to write the book. And that's, figure out, the beginning, middle, and end. Where am I taking the readers? How am I taking them there? So I'm learning how to do that.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Swasti Bhattacharya, thank you so much for joining me to chat about the lives of these amazing women at the Brahma Vidya Mandir Ashram in central India. I've liked hearing about your journey as well, of like going there and like living this day-to-day life for yourself. And seeing how you carry those experiences with you to this day is really inspiring, because thinking about, some of the major influencing people in my own life from the past several decades at this point, it's just kind of amazing to look back and see who some of the most important figures were along the way. And to me, that's another big part of this project, is what I'm getting from you, is that these people are so important to your own journey that, paying tribute to them in writing is just a wonderful way to spend time to contribute to the stories of the world. So thank you so much for telling me, and I look forward to having you back on the podcast when the book is released. So thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you if they want to follow along with what you're doing?
I'm on Blue Sky.
Oh, sweet. I am too. We'll follow each other.
But I have to figure out how to do it. I mean, I signed up, but I haven't done anything with it. The best way to follow me is hard. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I never post. So I don't have a good answer for that right now.
Totally fine. I think you're also from Sacred Rites. You're also on the Sacred Rites website at the Sacred Rites 2025 Carpenter cohort list. So I will put a link to the Carpenter cohort in the show notes so people can find you there. Dr. Swasti Bhattacharya, thank you so much for being here. I've had a blast.
Thank you.